And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to welcome back former U.S. Senator from Alabama, Doug Jones. He's also a former U.S. attorney and author of Bending Toward Justice. Senator Jones, good to see you, my friend.
Dean, it's great to be back with you. I appreciate the opportunity.
He's traveling the country, getting people ready for the midterm. We are 34 days away. But first of all, you were credited in all the publications as being, quote, the Sherpa for then Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who's now Justice. And yes, this week was her first day on the bench. Just on a personal note, what was it like for you to see someone
awesome.
you work with? Yeah.
No, let me tell you, it was truly a remarkable day. My wife and I went Friday when she had her ceremonial investiture. She had taken the oath, a couple of months earlier, right after Justice Breyer left. But they did a ceremonial special court setting. I mean, it was not in like the Rose Garden or some public venue. It was a setting of the U.S. Supreme Court. And she came in, before she ascended to the bench, she sat in a chair that John Marshall, the first Chief Justice, had sat in. The Chief Justice had her come up, was sworn in. And to just be there for that was just remarkable. And then later that day, she gave a talk at the Library of Congress that I would encourage everybody, all your listeners, to go to the Library of Congress and on their website and pull that up and hear her speech. It was both an emotional day, an inspirational day, Dean. I got to tell you, she's going to be a remarkable justice.
I have to look it up. Look at her being sworn in actually gives me a teeny bit more confidence because we also heard the oral argument on the Alabama case. But we're at a time where in Gallup and Pew, the Supreme Court has the lowest favorability rating and essentially credibility. And there's a huge partisan divide. Pew shows the partisan divide now are the biggest gap ever between Republicans and Democrats. Democrats really giving up on believing in the court. And I'm so deeply concerned about that because there are those on the right who want to get rid of our institutions. That's how you usher in the autocracy. If on the left, if we give up on institutions, there's no one left fighting for them. So what's your reaction? And how do is Justice Jackson being on the court, maybe that's one of the steps to having us believe in the court again?
There's a lot of steps to rehabilitation, and I think that is the first step. She is going to be able to do that. From I was there Monday. She just jumped right into the fray. But interestingly, in that Alabama case, she really took people to school. She talked about the Constitution. She talked about the fact that the 14th Amendment was passed to bolster and to redress grievances and let, as she said, the freedmen be equal and give them opportunities that they had not had. And I think she has got the chance to really bring people along, including colleagues on the bench. She's got the personality and the intellect to try to do that. And I think if you read the accounts from her first 2 days on the court, you can see that even the conservative commentators are talking about her, how bright she was, how she jumped into these things, and she really went to the heart of the issues. That really, and you may want to talk about the case in a minute, but she really, and I'll wait then. But she uses Justice Scalia's philosophy to really take people to school.
So let's talk about the case. It's argued it's Merrill versus Milligan from your home state of Alabama, and it was a redistricting plan adopted by the Republican state legislature. More than a quarter of the state's population is African American, but only 1 in 7 districts are going to have a realistic chance of having minority representation. And there was a Court of Appeals, 3 judges, including Trump appointees, who found it to be violating the Voting Rights Act earlier, and this court put it on hold. Now they're actually hearing the case. First, before we get to the legal part, what can you share about Alabama? What happened there? What did the Republicans do in your state?
Well, you've got a gerrymandered legislature that passes gerrymandered congressional districts. These were districts designed to protect incumbents. They did the same thing with the state House and state Senate races that made no sense in many instances. It was clearly designed to keep one district, Congresswoman Terry Sewell's district, which is in what they call the Black Belt of Alabama, where so many of the African-American citizens live. Keep that district, move the lines a little bit, but essentially keep it intact and dilute the rest of them. I mean, and that's how you keep your Republican incumbents done. And it was done in a way to do exactly that, to dilute the Black voting strength in a population of Black voters that has grown in Alabama. It has grown since 2010. And, the 3-judge panel, which, as you said, was 2 Trump appointees and 1 Obama appointee, wrote a 100 and some odd page opinion that was really strong. I mean, on both constitutional grounds, the Voting Rights Act grounds, had precedent after precedent of Supreme Court rulings. And yet this Supreme Court allowed the old redrawn districts to go into effect, and hearing the case now. So we'll see, but that's the status of it. And a lot of people think it's going to be the death knell for the Voting Rights Act because it involves Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. After the arguments yesterday, I'm not sure. They may shred it a little bit more. I don't know if they completely get rid of it. But I'm a little bit more optimistic than some of the commentators that I saw, that they're going to have to, I'll put it this way, Dean. I really believe that if they uphold Alabama, and not the plaintiffs in this case, if they uphold Alabama, they're going to have to do some real serious legal gymnastics to get it done. And it will clearly be agenda driven rather than an outcome driven, rather than by the law.
After the last term, at least to us, it felt like an agenda driven. We're literally in the same week you overturn Roe v. Wade, and then you strike down a state law here in New York on guns. So
Yes.
you go, it goes back to states, but not with guns. No. We're going to take that up here. And yeah, I get legally there's a different approach to it, but it just feels one issue after the other. Felt like an extension of the Republican National Committee was running the court last year at the end there. And that's really troubling. That's troubling.
And it's been coming, especially in voting rights. You've seen them chip away. And I was reading something the other day it's one of the reasons why you're seeing the public have a less confidence and seeing in the institution of the Supreme Court, and seeing people that believe the Supreme Court is more political, because if you look at so many of those decisions, it appears that the court is giving more opportunities for Republicans to win elections and less opportunities for Democrats to win elections. And that you can't help but think that is politically driven.
I went back to the day and looked at the Shelby County case from 2013, and I noticed Justice Thomas's concurring opinion. He wanted to rule the Voting Rights Act unconstitutional completely.
Yeah.
And you're like, are you kidding me? The Voting Rights Act was an outgrowth of the 15th Amendment to finally ensure we have equal ability to vote, to help the African-American community specifically. That's what the 15th Amendment was about. And I don't understand for the life of me, Justice Thomas, nor Ginny Thomas. Although together there's some team in bringing down democracy. Their idea of democracy is slightly different than our idea. I'm chatting with Doug Jones. By the way, you mentioned Justice Jackson about the 14th Amendment. Can you share a little bit from what you saw about what she talked about and giving a little history there? Because, the idea of race not playing a role in the 14th Amendment would be rewriting history. It was one of the 3 post-Civil War amendments. Clearly, there was a reason race was a part of it. Being born in this country, getting citizenship, was to overturn decisions like Dred Scott and ones where Black people didn't have citizenship because you were born here. So they had to make it clear. But can you share anything about that?
Well, you basically said it just right there. I mean, Alabama was arguing that their districts were race neutral, and that's what the Constitution requires. And that's when Justice Jackson said, hold on a minute. So much of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment was designed to give people opportunities who had been denied opportunities. And it wasn't even thought about that it was race neutral. Race was a part of that, or else they would not have had to do it. And she really, I think, did a wonderful job of explaining and just knocking out the theory that the state of Alabama put forth. And it's just ironic that the state of Alabama, in my opinion, and I'm from the state and I love my state, but it's just so ironic that the state of Alabama is trying to argue that they're race neutral. They've never been race neutral. Okay. They've just never, ever been race neutral on the things that they have done with regard to their gerrymandering, particularly a Republican dominated legislature. And Justice Jackson did it in a way that she was able to go back to history. And this is what I was referring to when I talked about Scalia a few minutes ago. Justice Scalia is the hero of the right. And he really changed the way that the court is looking at judicial interpretation, constitutional interpretation, legislative interpretation, and that is to go back to what the intent of the writers of the Constitution, the founding fathers, or the writers of the amendment and what was passed. And that's what she did. She used Justice Scalia's own history to basically remind everybody about why the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments were passed. It was great. It was an unbelievable argument. I was not there for that argument. I went day one, but I have heard it. I've listened to it. I've read some of the transcripts. It's remarkable.
It's great stuff. Unfortunately, it's going to be banned in most GOP states because critical race theory banned. So they won't get to read it because that's an uncomfortable truth. What? You can't talk about the real history of this country. It makes me uncomfortable. It's so funny. The law says if it causes discomfort. Every class I took in high school and grammar would cause me discomfort. It was hard. I couldn't ban it because I didn't like geometry and algebra. Like, let's get rid of algebra. I'm getting discomfort over it. This is ridiculous. So, I want to get your, being a Southerner yourself, I'm not, but you are. And I wanted to touch on Herschel Walker, but not on the controversy with Herschel Walker per se. It is what it is. We know he paid, that's his choice. It's the hypocrisy that we call out, not that
Right.
we had an abortion. If you're dating someone or you're married or someone wants to get an abortion, I completely support that. But does the hypocrisy, Republicans, you dealt with them a lot in Alabama. Georgia's not far away. Is this kind of thing, the hypocrisy, does it move any Republicans, or is it more like independent voters might be like, wow, he wants to ban abortion, even in the case of rape, but when it comes to a girlfriend who gets pregnant, he wants the convenience of having her be able to have reproductive freedom?
Dean, I think it'll move some Republicans, but you've still got a base of Republican voters. You've got a base of Democratic voters that are not going to move regardless. I mean, this is a state that in 2016 Donald Trump carried. It is a state that he almost carried in 2020.
Right.
The rest of the southern states, Donald Trump did carry. Hypocrisy apparently did not mean a lot to those voters at that time. But I do think it will play with the independent voters. I do think it'll play with more moderate Republican voters, that things like this are just a bridge too far. Somebody can't be trusted. Character is always, I think, important in the mind of Southern voters. And it's going to be a challenge, I think. And I'm not sure that this is the only thing that we'll see with Herschel Walker. I just think he's a really a candidate that is there because he was a football player and a Heisman Trophy winner that won a national championship with Georgia 40 years ago or whenever that was.
And Donald Trump loved him. And, I've covered it on my show in the past, way before this, his documented serial lying. And that's the Atlantic Journal-Constitution documenting. It's not me going through it. And the ad being played with his ex-wife in it, where he threatened to kill her. And his defense is, I don't remember it. It's impossible. He's incredible. He has no credibility in my eyes. But you won a special election in Alabama, and you ran against a flawed candidate. How did those, I'm trying to think back, and you know better, you lived it. Was it some Republicans crossing over and voting for you, or is it just some Republicans just stayed home? They go, I can't vote for this Republican. I'm not going to vote for Doug Jones. I'm just not going to vote. And then the zero-sum game, it kind of helped us out.
It was a combination. It was all of the above, plus a strong Democratic turnout. I mean, I think that at the time in 2016, I think that the black vote was normally about 25% of the registered voters in Alabama. But in my special election, the black vote was about just under 30% of the total vote cast. So that percentage made a big difference. And look, man, I give a lot of credit to the black women in Alabama who really turned out at that and worked really hard. I think that was the most significant thing, was the turnout that we were able to produce among Democrats that go to the polls. But then you did have a number of moderate Republican voters, and any independent voter pretty much, I think, voted my way instead of for Roy Moore in that. And it was a special election. So it was one of those things turnout was higher actually in my race in 2017 than what we anticipated. It was as high as a normal state election. But it was a combination of real Democratic enthusiasm and a lack of enthusiasm for Roy Moore.
It's very true. I remember that. I remember literally standing in this room cheering. I couldn't believe it. I'm seeing the returns are coming. I'm like, no way, we can't win this. I'm like 90% counted, 95. I'm like, what? I'm sitting here. I don't even look at the screen. I'm like, I can't look because it was like watching the New York Mets play my team or the Giants. I'm like, they're going to the last minute fumble or something's going to happen. And so, but I remember that it was vivid and it gave us, that was one of the moments that gave us a sense of confidence that we could overcome Trump and Trumpism at that time. And it paved the way for 2018, the huge
No
midterm.
question.
So,
Dean, I appreciate you saying that because I don't, look, it was a lot more than I bargained for when I ran. Okay. I mean, it really was. But the fact is, we heard when my wife Louise and I travel all over the country, even to this day, that said, "You give us hope." We'd had a 1 year Donald Trump, and it really provided some significant momentum going into the 2018 midterms, in which it was the moderate Democrats out there, guys. It was the mods who really helped get those middle of the road voters over to win in 2018. So I appreciate you recognizing.
Sure, I remember. No, I vividly remember there were a few moments that gave me hope, and that was one of them. I'm talking about Doug Jones, a former U.S. Senator from Alabama. So you're traveling around talking to people. The midterm were 33, 32 days out from it. When you're traveling, is there one or two top issues you're hearing from voters?
Oh, sure. I mean, look, abortion is a top issue. There's no question. The economy is a top issue. People are concerned about that. But abortion is an issue that has galvanized a lot of people around this country. You only look at the Kansas vote. I was in Kansas about 3 weeks ago with Governor Kelly, doing some work with her out there, and you can feel it. You can sense it. They registered a lot of voters. Women turned out in a big way. I think there is a growing concern in this country that the Supreme Court is taking away people's rights. I think there's a growing concern about what has been referred to as the MAGA faction of the Republican Party. We've got a lot of really MAGA candidates that are running out there. And people are still concerned about the economy. They're concerned about inflation. But Dean, what they're seeing is that, that the president, even though he's still a little underwater with his personal numbers, his numbers have gone up. But they see people with a plan. They see folks out there trying and working for them. And they see the bipartisan bills that this president is able to help get through Congress. And then times when we did not have bipartisanship on bills, they were able to move things like the Inflation Reduction Act, the American Rescue Plan. All of those things, I think we've had a historic run for this president over the last 20 months or so. And people are beginning to see that and recognize it. And again, you couple that with some really flawed candidates out there. There's still a great deal of enthusiasm, even though, as typically happens, that gap narrows as you get close to an election.
It is. And as I keep talking about on my show, every race can be close. Ones that we thought we were going to win big, like John Fetterman was going to walk away, it's going to be close. Ones that we had no business being in based on history and being a midterm election, we are in. Tim Ryan's neck and neck with J.D. Vance. He's probably leading him right now. You've got other races where I'm concerned about Nevada. And people aren't talking about Nevada at all, but I'm really concerned about the Senate and governor race right there. Have you been there at all?
Yeah, no, I went out and did a day with Catherine Cortez Masto. There was one event Governor Sisolak was there. And I'm concerned about that too. I think everybody recognizes Nevada is going to be a tough state for a lot of reasons. But we clearly have the strongest slate of candidates out there. There's no question about that. And I'm hopeful that she will be able to do. The resources will be coming in. And I'm hopeful that the unions and voters that have traditionally been very helpful. Nevada got hit real hard with COVID, harder than any other state, because it is a state totally dependent on the entertainment and tourism industry. And they suffered a blow. And Democrats are trying to come out of that. And I'll tell you, Dean, there's another one out there that's a sleeper, and that's North Carolina. Sherry Beasley is neck and neck with Ted Budd, who's a congressman. He was the first Senate candidate that Donald Trump endorsed. Sherry was the first Black female Chief Justice in North Carolina's history, came within 401 votes of getting elected in 2020 out of 5 million cast. She's a proven vote getter. And that's the sleeper race that I've been telling folks to watch for too, because she is a great candidate running a great campaign. And Ted Budd is one of those guys who is a kind of a MAGA election denier, and they're trying to keep it quiet. And so he's running a pretty quiet campaign. But if you look at his history, as as Sherry Beasley likes to say on the campaign trail, if you look at his history, then this bud's not for you.
Oh, that's great. No, I've seen that in the poll. I look at the polling every day. And speaking of polling, and I'm not cherry picking because The Economist had President Biden down in the low 40s for a long time. Brand new poll just out, 49% approval rating by The Economist.
Yeah.
And it's a YouGov poll, so it's got a B+ rating. It's a good methodology, but I watched it track it. It wasn't like it was 41 yesterday, now 49. Some people are taking notice. I don't say this because I'm partisan, and I am very partisan, but I think President Biden's approval rating numbers should be far higher than the average 42 and 43% on what he's delivered. And for the life of me, I don't know if it's hyperpolarization or the message doesn't cut through because still Trump is sucking up the oxygen, or media. You look at the media, it's like 5 articles on Trump, like he's still president, and buried on the bottom, record job growth this quarter. And you're like, why is our media? It's not helping President Biden, our media. Let's put it this way.
Yeah,
They're not demonizing, they're
look,
ignoring him.
I agree with you. The numbers ought to be higher. I think there's a combination of things. If you remember back in the first 6 months of his presidency, after the American Rescue Plan, all of the media was focused on the fights that the Democratic Party was having within itself.
Yeah,
And that does some damage, and all the media was talking about it. And the president and folks like myself were trying to break through with that, to talk about other things going on. But yet there was still this focus on the progressive wing of the party and the moderate wing of the party, trying to get, something done that ultimately got done. You had a couple of issues that came up, and then inflation kind of dominated things for a little bit, and people just overlook some things about the CHIPS Act and national security and the the PAC Act for veterans. Those things kind of get down by the wayside when people go to the gas pump, and gas has come down now, and people have been able to focus on those accomplishments a lot more. And it's just like I said, they're comparing the candidates too. And they're seeing Democrats who are at least trying. They're getting out there, working, they're doing things. And you don't see too many plans from the Republican Party. Maybe some promises, maybe some generalities, but not a real plan. And I think that that's making a difference for folks too. So we'll see how this goes. And just don't underestimate the fact that we got, even Donald Trump may be in the headlines a lot. Not all of it's very good.
Oh, no, it's not. It's not. And the GOP plan, everything I've seen from Kevin McCarthy involves Hunter Biden's laptop. That's about it. I mean, I swear that's their plan for inflation. Apparently that laptop answers all the questions.
It does.
It's
apparently so.
And so very last thing, in the last 30 days, what do you tell people now? Like, we could win this. I tell people, we come out big, statistically, data shows we can win, and we can win so many races. What do you say to people in the closing argument here as we get down to it? Because people started already early voting in certain states.
I tell them to keep their foot on the gas, to make sure that they get people organized, keep people engaged, keep them energized, remind people of what all this president has done, remind people of what this Democratic Congress has able to get through, even bipartisan legislation that should have gotten through under the Trump administration, couldn't get through because he kept torpedoing things. Right. We were able to get these things done. And yes, we've got a plan. We're working on the inflation. We understand that pain, but get out there, get people organized, because these elections have consequences. And by the way, this candidate, for instance, running for the Senate in Arizona, is a MAGA extremist. People don't like extremists. In Oklahoma, the Senate candidate is a MAGA extremist, and running against Kendra Horn, a former member of Congress. Same thing in Pennsylvania, the same thing in Georgia. So making those comparisons and contrast, when we're getting things done and they're not, and they're putting these extremists in. Dean, I'm going to tell you, people don't like extremists on either side of the party.
Right.
They don't. And that's what we're facing. And I think Democrats are seeing that, and they're working really hard. So that's the elevator speech I give.
I like it very much, although I like our extremists better than theirs, because our extremists just want to help people more. Their extremists want to end democracy. So it's vastly different. But Senator Jones, it's great chatting with my friend. Maybe if you got time, we'll squeeze you in one more time before November 8th. But in any event, we'll continue the conversation. I always enjoy talking to you.
Thanks, Dean. I appreciate it. And happy to come back before the midterms.
Great. We'll have you on next month before the election. Thanks. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.